delay, take it away.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. And let's see if this, there we go. I was waiting for it to flip over. And I need to get rid of something that's in my way. There we go. So as has been introduced, the Systems Approach to Nursery Certification, or SANC, as we use the acronym. And I'll say that I have a lot of slides, a lot of information. I'll move fairly fast through them. But what I'm counting on is that this PowerPoint will be available later, as I understand from Irfan, so that you can come back and pick up some details that I might fly through fairly fast. So as I often do with any training class that I'm working with in regards to SANC, I'll be looking face to face at those in the room and kind of set the stage of why are you here? Is it that you're lost, confused, unsure, unclear, perplexed, disoriented, or bewildered? And that may be about SANC, and it may be about other things in life. And I'll focus on SANC. So why SANC? What drove SANC to come about? There were challenges to plant certification and nursery and greenhouse facilities. These challenges were increasing, particularly with increasing pressure from invasive organisms, with pests hitchhiking, with nursery stock and moving around. The public was becoming and still increases, and they're becoming more environmentally conscious. And international, national political pressure in regards to pests that are moving around. We were seeing increased shipping requirements, particularly as the nurseries were concerned with compliance agreements coming in and more dictating what things needed to be done. And then in response to these increasing requirements of resources, however, there were less financial resources, as certainly felt by the state and federal regulators and the industry itself. So a lot of work took place, several large meetings in Washington, DC and elsewhere. And it was a little bit at the beginning of, like, if you take what I liken to taking a group of people, put them in a large room, they're blindfolded, you bring in an elephant, you tell them they have 60 seconds to touch the elephant, which they don't know is an elephant, and then take the elephant out and then start talking with people and asking, what is it that they perceived in regards to that elephant? So we went through that type of conversation to finally get to where we could start actually defining what SANC was going to become. The bottom line is to improve pest risk management. It's to work at preventing pest problems from coming in, monitor and scout crops for issues, particularly in focusing on quality and the pests, accurately diagnose the pests and diseases, address problems as they are seen through scouting and so forth in an expeditious manner, document what's seen and what's done in response to those observations and other practices at the nursery. And then a required series of audits. And we use the word audit and verify back and forth. Sometimes when you say audit, people start to get a little bit twitchy. So we learned to also speak about verifying and verification. And these audits are done both at the internal level, in other words, in the nursery, and also external by the state, or what I will be referring to as a state certifying authority. All this is in order to avoid shipping pests and pathogens. If we look at the SANC framework at 100,000 feet, it's a voluntary state-administered certification program used to augment a substitute for traditional plant certification programs. Right now, the traditional plant certification programs are still in place, but as we get SANC more and more established, then we hope that there will be a transition away from that into that SANC certified nurseries won't have to do all those steps done with traditional plant certification inspections. SANC is a flexible program that enables participation and certification by a variety of plant production facilities. SANC certified facilities use an audit-based systems approach to facilitate and expedite shipping their plants by reducing pest risk and distribution. And then this bottom one is probably best captures the three elements of the SANC program. SANC certified facilities conduct a risk assessment to identify the critical control points that contribute to pest risks in their production system and implement best management practices to reduce their pest risks with the participation of all employees. There's a lot there that captures the SANC program. So I'm going to drill a little bit deeper. And what we first formulated after a couple of years fixing to commence to begin to get ready to get started with the development of the SANC program is we do have the state level model standard, and what we just in short calls the SANC standards. And it's a document that's 7 or 8 pages long. But what it does is it describes the general requirements in regards to the standards. In a facility being interested in SANC, the application and enrollment requirements. For the participating facilities, what we will be looking for in regards to the work they need to do and represent in a manual is that about the staff and facility, that they will do a risk assessment, which leads to the development of a pest management plan, which then becomes part of a facility manual. That there will be internal and external audits, as I spoke about a minute ago, and that there'll be certain records to keep and certain documents to have available as it is. It also identifies the state certifying authority responsibilities. And then as the audits take place, there may be non-compliance and then the corrective measures that would need to be taken to correct those. We have a key diagram in regards to the SANC program, which we call the flow. And so there are 6 principal steps in getting certification successfully. Is that step 1 where a nursery has identified that it's interested in going through the SANC program. And it will be that on step 2, there'll be a meeting, emails, phone calls, and so forth, as this preliminary meeting with the state certifying authority representatives meeting with those at the nursery or greenhouse. Further discussion about the requirements of the SANC program. Moving forward, the next step would be indeed conducting the risk assessment, and that's to identify potential pest pathways in the nursery and strategies to address them. Moving down to step 4 will be the development of a facility manual, where the growers create a plan to address the identified pest risks and keep records of what is done. Step 5 is the audit aspect of being certified. And then with that first set of internal audits, and then the first, what we call external audit, that's where the state certifying authority is conducting the audit, working with the nursery staff. All of that gets completed, then there'll be SANC approval. A couple forms are filled out, and then they can move on and use the SANC logo on their products. So just a little bit more drilling in regards to these milestones in certification. There is the risk assessment. So it's a pest risk analysis of the facility. We have what we call a risk assessment tool application. It was developed first as a spreadsheet, and it certainly got the job done. But as we kept working with it through what we call our pilot program, working with the first nurseries, as we saw some redundancy and just a bit of a time consumption, if you will, in getting it completed. So we have developed a online version, but it's still in a beta phase and going through testing of this risk assessment tool application. And through this next year, work will continue on the online version. So after the risk assessment is done, you can the nursery move forward with a pest management plan. And those things that are going to be showing up in the pest management plan are in this list here about what the nursery does in regards to scouting, reporting, their propagation area, containers and media, water irrigation, site security equipment, shipping, origin of plant materials, disposal, and production practices. They then can move to further constructing the facility manual. And the facility manuals that we have range anywhere from 15 to 25 pages. These are not manuals that become 100 pages or anything like that. There are other certification programs out there with the USDA that do approach some huge numbers of pages, but we've worked hard to keep the requirements of what needs to be in the facility manual to the minimum number of pages. So simply said that with the manual, there'll be a mission statement, an organization chart, the SANC positions and responsibilities of those staff at the facility, a site map, the pest management plan, a description of document control, a description of how they will conduct audits, the corrective action reports, and then a signature page for the state certifying authority facility program manager. Once we have the facility manual and it's been reviewed and signed off by the state certifying authority, then we have effectively the implementation of the SANC facility manual by the nursery. And following that, then it'll be that the nursery would start conducting internal audits, and the state certifying authority would start conducting their external audits, both for internal, external. Right now, we have a requirement that there be a full systems audit take place once a year, and then the surveillance audits 2 or more times a year. And a surveillance audit can be where at the nursery level and at the state level, someone decides that, well, I want to focus on, are we following through on what we said we were doing in the manual on our media? Are we treating it, processing it, holding it, and so forth, as we describe in the manual? So it's parts of the systems audit, if you will. One of the things we've seen repeatedly as we've worked with our pilot nurseries is that the nursery staff and management and the state inspectors gain a much greater understanding of the facility, its pest risk management, and they certainly improve their communication as they all have to look at the whole of the nursery or the greenhouse. So as said before, it is voluntary and it's audit based. These are key things we'd like to keep emphasizing for those nurseries and greenhouse sites that are interested in SANC. And it's all about reducing pest risk and moving stock, enhancing plant quality, improving production practices, and fostering communication between all parties. Where did this all come from in terms of concept? It actually came from hazard analysis and critical points, HACCP as it's called, which actually was first developed back in the 60s when NASA asked Pillsbury to provide the first foods for space flights. And so HACCP attempts to avoid hazards rather than attempting to inspect finished products for the effects of those hazards. And I'll explain a little bit more about that as I've tried to come up with other visual analogies about this attempt to only find a problem after it is well developed. The systems approach strategy uses nursery practices that minimize the likelihood of incursion, establishment, and growth of plant pests and pathogens in a nursery, the operational practicality. A system approach requires 2 or more measures that are independent of each other. So in fact, it becomes a multi-layer protection strategy. And so there are a lot of words that are used, and this slide here is just trying to more simply say, okay, what does this all mean? What are you talking about? So let's look at a couple examples of critical control points and best management practices. So we might have that it's been determined at this nursery, growing nursery plants near wild host plants is a critical control point. So a best management practice is to remove the wild host plants a minimum distance from the plants in the site. buy-ins of infested plants for grow out is a CCP. So we're saying for best management practice, buy only from certified suppliers. You can also segregate your first plants into holding areas to make sure there's nothing there and you have the opportunity to fully inspect or scout the plants. So these are just some examples. They can and works towards the tailoring of the SANC program to the individual nurseries and greenhouses. So I've been speaking about the different activities or tasks at a nursery where they're looking at SANC and they're involved in SANC. And this is just a description of what we've seen take place at the nurseries in terms of the task is to do the risk assessment. So typically the risk assessment is done as a cooperative venture by the people at the nursery and the inspectors or representatives for the state certifying authority. In terms of the development of the pest management plan, more commonly it's the nursery folks like to tackle that and certainly come up with the first draft. But I have the plus sign there saying that we've had some nurseries that from the get-go, they involve the inspector in the development of the pest management plan. And that's their choice as to which way they want to approach that. The SANC facility manual is, again, principally first drafted out by the nursery, but they can also engage the inspectors. Internal audits are done by the nursery. Hold on. Working from home makes you think of different things. So the internal audits are by the nursery, and then there's the annual systems audit done by the state certifying authority. And then the 2 surveillance audits, as addressed earlier, are done by the state certifying authority. So the contrast, Fido inspection from SANC. The Fido inspection is traditionally done as a load by load inspection. And the question generally is focused on other regulatory pests. And it becomes what I call a snapshot in time and understanding what's going on at the nursery. And so this represents current practices. In regards to SANC, it reviews the processes that produce the plants. And questions commonly asked as you move through the nursery and look at all different aspects of it are who, what, when, how, and why, and a focus on verification. And so because of the way this is approached, where things are set in motion, particularly the best management practices, I've called it like it's a movie in format as opposed to the snapshot and understanding of what's going on at the nursery. So these are the SANC requirements. So if you will, the phytosanitary inspection, it's a small snapshot with the SANC systems approach. It's verification of all that's taken place at the nursery. And how do you verify in doing these audits, both at the internal, external level? And one thing that we've quickly learned, and now the nurseries do this, is it's the best thing is for the nursery and the state to develop one audit checklist. And then the nursery uses that audit checklist to do their internal audits. And then the state comes in with the very same audit checklist and uses that to do the external. The thing about SANC is not to, as these audits or verifications are done, is to catch the nursery greenhouse in a gotcha. The whole point is how good can we make this facility in terms of managing pest risks. So as the audit is done, it's interviewing the managers as well as the boots on the ground folks. You interview all the people in production and shipping and receiving out in the field. You're reviewing the training that takes place. You're reviewing the records that are required to be made available. You're reviewing all the processes at the nursery in terms of growth, and you're also looking at the plants. There is a document that's available, and at the end, I'll show you the SANC website. But there's a CCP checklist and best management practices companion document. And what it does is, as we have constructed our risk assessment and then what becomes a pest management plan, is a focus on compartmentalizing the nursery into the inputting of the plants, the propagation activities, the site in general in terms of its description, the shipping, where that's located and how that's done, media containers, what are they, how are they handled, where are they located, production practices via the greenhouse, outdoor containers, the field and the equipment, scouting, how that's done, and any observations, how that's moved through, so the right people at the nursery become aware of the fact that the potential pest was found. Training, how is that conducted, and the requirement of keeping records, as like scouting, there needs to be records. The record keeping in general, sanitation and disposal, how their water is handled, and then the facility security. So I've just got a couple slides here that are just showing some gain from doing the inspections and a little bit of just what we're looking at. So we have at a nursery, product has come in, and so you're looking to see what are the records of the material that's come in, where has it come from, is it a reputable supplier, how do they go about inspecting the plant material, what are the procedures at the nursery, do they appear adequate. If they see something suspicious, does the nursery or greenhouse have an area designated as an assessment area, or isolation area, a quarantine area? Different words are used. At this particular nursery, McKay Nursery in Wisconsin, they do have an isolated area, and then they also have what they call red tags. So when something is observed, this red tag is serving as a means of communication, documenting what's seen, and then they have a procedure described as to how this red tag needs to move from one person to another to effect a proper response of determining what the problem is and what needs to be done. If they are growing their own propagation materials, how is that conducted? And you look for the little things, if you will, if they're using collection buckets to bring material in, what happens once it gets into the propagation house? So the thing here is that these containers were on the ground and now they're stacked on top of the plants. So that may raise the risk of an infection of some pathogen taking place. Moving into where they do their propagation, is it a clean area? In this particular nursery, when we went in during the risk assessment audit, is that we saw that the room was actually fairly unkempt, dirty, a lot of things on the wall that were distracting, and a very old, well-used wooden bench that they were doing their principal work on. And so it was quickly understood that this would need to be corrected to move ahead for successful certification. So this is what when we came back to do the external audit, they said they were ready. This is how we found the propagation room. A lot of extraneous materials that had been removed. The walls were cleaned off. If there were bugs that were coming in, now we have uncluttered white walls to see bugs moving around. And the wooden table was replaced by a stainless steel table, which is much more sanitary and easier to clean off. Media management. You can have piles of media, but the big thing is where is it stored? Is it on some sort of protective area, protective covering so that it's not in direct contact with native soil? With equipment being used to move media around, is this bucket also used elsewhere in the nursery? Which it can be, but do they have a procedure for cleaning that bucket as it moves from the field into moving their clean media? Other media are going to be in different types of packaging. And so how is that stored? Does it stay in their plastic wrappings and so forth and not disturbed while it's outdoors? That's fine. And in this case, they also have them on pallets, which are then also on a tarred surface. So this helps us stay much more clean. If they have ebb and flow in their greenhouses, then you can look to see that the water doesn't stick around any longer than it needs to achieve the watering. Are the trays that they may have, are they elevated on benches of some sort? Do they have well-maintained roads? Do they have good drainage ditches and adequate production bed slope to move water off? Are they organized? Again, it's easy to see how things are set out in this particular nursery, and they have well-defined roads and so forth. Are they using the topography and berming so that you have good movement of water away from the plants? Are their ponds lined? And if they're using the pond water as a primary water source, is it treated in some fashions, be it ozone and other products? With containers, how are those set up to get them off from any native soil, be it through shelving, pallets, plastic wrap, to keep them as uncontaminated as possible before use? Color scrap pile placement. There's no problem with having a coal pile, but is it located away from the production area? And even if it's located away from the production area, what is the slope? So this is away, but water that comes in and percolates through the coal pile, in this case, is going to move downslope into the production area. So this nursery would want to move that coal pile. Various types of equipments that's processing a lot of plants. What's their cleaning schedule? What are they using for cleaning? Again, the use of equipment and the cleaning practices if it's moving through different areas of the nursery. And then garden hoses. When the hoses that are used for watering are not in use, they hung up and the hose ends are off the ground. So there's more and more about the risk assessment, but I just want to give you a flavor of that and the things that we look for and questions we ask. And it's all so much based on your observations, but it's also talking one-on-one with the people working in the different areas and making sure they help you understand what's going on if you're that inspector there to do the audit. So we have the risk assessment tool. And so, as I said before, we have a spreadsheet that was used, and we're using a little bit of the software application, but it's still in a beta mode. And through this next year, we're continuing to work on it and get it finalized. So I like to compare the traditional inspection versus a SANC audit, if you will. And ultimately, my visualization of the protection offered to a nursery with these types of traditional inspections provides a limited amount of personal protection gear against the pests. Whereas with the SANC program and the audits, the risk assessment, the pest management plan, all the requirements to meet the standards of SANC, in effect makes it so that the nursery is kind of like this fellow here with the bomb-proof suit to protect him from the pests. Scalability. We've worked with large and small nurseries, from 650 acre nurseries with at peak time about 600 employees to greenhouses that are down around the size of 10 acres and about 30 employees. And the concepts and the standards of SANC translate themselves to different size operations. And we also have said to our inspectors when we were training them, you know, there may well be a nursery that, for one reason or another, really aren't going to be able to become SANC certified. But there are so many principles about the SANC program that could be moved to that nursery to help their operations if they so wish to do so. So again, just another visualization is that with using the SANC program standards, it's kind of like setting a different type of virtual biodome of protection over the facility. We do have a manual that's now available to our inspectors, and it just captures all the different things that takes place with getting a nursery certified and maintaining the certification. For the program overview, getting started risk assessment, reviewing a nursery's manual, the audits, and final approval. So what has the SANC initiative accomplished so far? Well, I'll start backwards to move forwards a little bit. We started up in 2010 where we obtained Farm Bill funding. And the principal partners in this were the National Plant Board, the nursery and greenhouse industry as represented by American Hort, and the Society of American Florists, and then also the USDA Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, or APHIS. So as I said earlier, we developed the standards, and then what we call our pilot program, where we actually went out and started working with nurseries. We started in 2014. The National Plant Board is divided into 4 regions. So we were able to get 2 facilities in each of these 4 regions step forward and want to become our guinea pigs. As we were working in the development of the SANC program, I liken it to, we got a plane going, we got it off the runway, it was flying at the beginning of our pilot program, but then clearly we were still developing parts of the SANC program even as it was flying. And so in order to do that, we had a standing group with subcommittees in terms of outreach and training and so forth. We set up the pilot program so it was 2 phases, a phase 1 and phase 2. And this map just quickly shows you that we tried to make sure that we were in all parts of the United States and working with different regionalities, if you will, as well as the different nurseries and greenhouses. Some of you may recognize some of the nurseries and greenhouses that are here. Our first group was at the time when we first started as Carned Piles, now Star Roses and Plants in Pennsylvania. Forest Keeling in Missouri, McKay in Wisconsin, Oregon Pride, Walla Walla Nursery in Washington, and Greenleaf Nursery in Oklahoma, and Southeast Growers in Georgia. We moved forward with phase 2, and we picked up another nursery in Georgia, another Greenleaf Nursery in North Carolina and Texas. And the purpose of that was to have some sister operations so that the first work was done in Greenleaf Nursery in Oklahoma. Could some of the work that they did just be translated over to Greenleaf Nursery in North Carolina to give them a quick start, and then figure out what's unique to their nursery and make sure that's accounted for and put in the manual? And the answer is yes, it did work that way. DS Cole Growers in New Hampshire, the Witherway Nurseries, Ohio, Loma Vista, Kansas, Dickman Farms in New York. And right now we're working with the Altman Plants Nurseries in California. And we have others that are working at certification out in Arizona. We have 2 of them out there and another one in Pennsylvania. So for SANC certification so far, we have 15. And this just quickly shows the timeline of nurseries as they came in and met the requirements of the SANC program and got certified in each of these years. We're looking to finish up this year into early next year with the last of our nurseries in the pilot program. 2 of them in California and 1 of them in Texas. So we're finishing the program. We're looking to go what we call live in January 2021. And rather than having a steering committee and subcommittees and so forth of people from all different states working on different aspects of the program, the SANC program will just go to the state certifying authorities and the industry take the reins. There'll no longer be the heavy, not heavy, but a very close hands-on of the National Plant Board and American Hort, particularly where American Hort had 2 consultants working on the program. The risk assessment tool application continues development and testing. We've developed, but we haven't tested yet, what I call an assessment audit of the state certifying authorities. So this is an audit of the auditors. We want a mechanism so that you can go look at how the auditors are conducting their work and making sure they're meeting the standards as defined for the SANC program. And then also, there's a continuation of the cooperative effort by the National Plant Board, Industry, and APHIS through the SANC Governing Board. So that's constructed real quick of voting members from each of the National Plant Board regions, also from American Hort, and 2 nursery representatives and an APHIS representative. And there can be ad hoc non-voting members. And the point of the SANC Governing Board, which is in place, is to provide oversight of the SANC program, ensure equal implementation and performance of the program by the states, identify future issues, provide a forum for resolving issues between states and or the industry, and provide guidance on participation and training. So what have we learned? What is some of the feedback that's come to us as we plow our way through the SANC program, particularly our pilot efforts? Is that we've been told by the industry that the business operations planning was improved because of the requirements of the SANC program. They commonly see a real, genuine product ownership by all employees, not just management, but those out in the field. Because SANC is creative in a sense, or I should say flexible, it's that then as something is identified needs to take place at a nursery, the inspector is to step back and let the nursery come up with what it thinks is a way to meet the requirement. And then there'll be a dialogue between the parties to go, yeah, that takes care of it, or no, you need to tweak this a little bit more. But we like to have the nursery have its hands firmly on the steering wheel to meet the SANC requirements. The participants are willing to share information with new companies, particularly a couple of our early nurseries made a real point for the next nurseries coming in to be available by email or phone calls to talk with them and help them get through the certification process. We learned that they want to find SANC certified growers as suppliers to their own operations, looking at the start clean, stay clean, and ship clean. And as probably many of you are aware, that systems approach is a future for many types of programs. And so SANC is just another one of them. We've heard from the companies, they like the definition of structure that SANC does require. And in fact, so much so in the original 8 pilot companies, 7 of them experienced major management changes and continued. And we thought, as we were at the time of these things happening, well, okay, we're going to lose that nursery. And they go, no. Even though we've changed ownership, the new owner wants us to continue on this, and so forth. So that was a pleasing surprise. And we learned that even though some of them are not progressing as they had hoped, they don't want to stop. So we've got one that's on, I would call it on sabbatical. They started, some things came up that they had to deal with. For the resources, they said, well, we got to stop, but they're still committed to come back in. And we learned to say the obvious, or to see the obvious, that upper management must be engaged to make it successful in getting the certification to take place. And the SPROs, or the state pest regulatory officials, must also be engaged in making sure that the inspectors and so forth who are going out to the nursery are properly encouraged. We've heard of where companies may raise standards on suppliers as a part of SANC. They're saving money with fewer calls and higher quality starter plants. And that actually fits well with other programs designed for efficiencies in business, such as lean management. Willoway Nurseries up in Ohio had been using lean management for about 3 years. And even with SANC coming in with its requirements, they saw just the further advantages to their business practices. And they just said, this all fits together. As said earlier, it's scalable. It works for small and large operations. We look to make sure that the engagement, employment of SANC stays consistent across states. Through the National Plant Board, we do know that SANC in of itself is accepted by the states, and that we're looking constantly to ease the implementation as appropriate. But we do say that it requires a dedicated effort at first to get all the different things taken care of. So we're looking at, as I contrast constantly, if you will, is that snapshot that has been occurring with nurseries. It's the annual and the shipping inspections, but you're only seeing things at a point in time, as opposed to the movie overlay from the SANC program, where it's a 24/7 operation of the best management practices, taking that place of an inspector not being there 24/7, but the best management practice is doing that 24/7 work. And at the bottom, SANC increases adoption of best management practices through systematic audits and structure. So here's our web address for the SANC program, sanc.nationalplantboard, all one word, .org. And then there are several pages of information tailored so that's in general. It's then some pages and information and links and so forth, more specific to the state end, the state certifying authority folks, and then pages for the industry, and lots of documents, and where there are the need for forms and reports. We have templates for several for those and available for downloading. And also a facility manual, an example facility manual is available. So a lot of information there. And I'll stop at this point, and then Irfan, I think I'll stop sharing, and then we can move to questions.
Sure thing, yeah. So if there are any questions at this point, you can either put them in the chat or you can ask them verbally. And at the same time, I'm also going to share with y'all the link to, here we go. So please complete this survey. I'm also going to put it in the chat here just in a moment. Here's a link. So for those of you that are looking for CUs, make sure you fill out that survey, especially that beginning part, right? It's going to ask you for your pesticide applicator license number. And for everyone else, please do fill out the survey as well. At the beginning, if it, when it asks, do you need CUs, just hit no, and I'll take you onto the impact assessment. It should take less than 5 minutes. And that really helps us to continue doing this type of programming. So I want to thank Dr. Dixon for taking the time to talk to us about SANC. So again, are there any questions at this time? So we got one here. Can you provide more detail about scalability to smaller versus larger nurseries?
I think that's the beauty of SANC is we have a broad requirement for each of the tasks that need to be done. So in a large facility, they do have the advantage, particularly in regards to the risk assessment in the sense of doing it and filling it out, and then also the writing of the pest management plan and the facility manual. where they can direct a person or a small number of people to work on those tasks. But that certainly can still be done by one person at a small nursery. And it's done in the sense of you do it a little bit at a time. And also we can provide examples so that you're not faced with the daunting task of learning some new jargon and go, well, what is it you really want? We do have examples of what's been done at other nurseries. And then it becomes simply a compare what's in that risk assessment. Is that applicable to your operation, be it small? It's a yes or a no. And then you can just copy out the things that are there or make appropriate adjustments in a keyword or something. So it can be done for a small operation. And I guess I would further ask, how small are they asking about, the person that posed the question?
Well, so this next question I think is kind of related, because this is probably kind of a small of an operation as you might be looking at potentially. Is this other person asked, how is this going to affect the small master gardener organizations who grow some of their plants along with purchasing for their annual plant sales?
Well, in part, it may be that they don't need to be certified. I'm not sure that why they're seeking to be certified. They may simply take some best management practices that are like in that CCP and best management practice document, and just go through that. I'd say it's about 20 pages. It's just compartmentalized into production, shipping, propagation, and so forth. But it captures a very clean, simple narrative of the critical control point and the best management practice to deal with it. So a small operation can just simply say, well, I would say just read through that. And if you have some problem areas or you want to improve an area, how would you do that? It's going to be in that document. They don't need to be certified. We don't, and that's one thing is we do try to get across is there are those nurseries that it'll be appropriate for them to be certified, and other nurseries there's not a need for it. And actually there will be some nurseries where they should not be certified because they have problems that they won't address.
And I think the person followed up and saying mom and pop size, usually just a few people who are involved, 1 to 5 people, for example. So I think you hit the nail on the head there that, I think each nursery might have to determine for themselves if it's really worth it to actually become certified. But regardless, there's a lot of principles in there that would
Exactly.
help improve best practices.
And if I'll offer, if you want to share my email, and anyone wants to directly email me and with that sort of question, I can go to the SANC web pages. I can more quickly find what I think might be an appropriate document to read. And also they can go look themselves, but I can help them get to some documents fairly quickly.
Now, as a follow-up to the question that came from the Master Gardener group, they also asked, currently the TDA comes out annually for an inspection of our greenhouse. Will this eventually replace them coming out? And that's the Texas Department of Agriculture.
Yeah, that's a long-term possibility that states may elect to do, but there's not a requirement. We're not talking about requiring that approach.
Great questions. Anyone else have any questions? All right. So once again, please fill out that survey there that's in the chat. I'll paste it here once again. And you can also check out the rest of the webinar series talks that we have going on here. Again, at the Six-Legged Aggie website, and there you'll see the top post is related to this webinar series. We do have a weekly webinar series called Chat with Green Aggies. So a few of us Aggies that basically get together and talk about some nursery challenges or some special topics as it relates to our green industry in Texas. So we have a Facebook group, which is called Chat with Green Aggies. You can find us on there, join it, and you'll get updated. And I do have one more question here. Let's see, that just came in the private chat. Let me just see if it's something that... All right, so this is someone that I'm going to put in contact directly with you. Looks like they're looking for some more specific information on potentially how to get certified.
Okay. And one thing I just want to add as I'm just looking at the screen and seeing pesticide is the SANC program in of itself does not instruct or dictate or guide anything in regards to the application of pesticides. That's left to the individual states and the structures they have set up for pesticide use and whatever products are going to be used.
Well, thank you again so much, Dr. Dixon, for joining us today and telling us about SANC. And yes, the manual is on the SANC website. Is that correct? That just came into the chat there.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. There's a lot of resources on that website that you can find, including that manual as well. Don't want to take much more of your time. I have recorded this presentation. So if you follow me on Facebook, Six-Legged Aggie Facebook, or you go back to this webinar series website, once I have the video uploaded, I will upload it on that webinar series page so you can access it right there in case you missed anything. So thank you all for joining today and hope to see you in the next upcoming weeks.